institutions, from the governments, with the participation of the feminist movement. So this will lead to a balance of the way of how we are standing now, 25 years after this commitment of the platform of Beijing. So it's key to us to be here with all of you, and we fully thank you for being with us this morning of March the 25th of 2021. Tomorrow, we will continue with all these works as well. And as I said some minutes before, the conclusions of these four will be added to the feminist agenda that's being created and built in Mexico and throughout the world. So thanks very much for being with us this morning today. I want to thank all our speakers today, our speakers of today and our speakers of tomorrow. Thanks very much for joining us. And we invite you to join us in this effort to achieve this change that we need and that we desire all over the world. So thanks very much. That's my welcome to all of you. And well, you know that you can join us throughout the day. Well, the technical team already spoke about these. Your questions, all the questions that you have, if you have any questions to our members, and if you're joining us from Zoom, you can ask the questions. You can use the chat option. And if you're following us through social media, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, also you can reach out and ask questions through all these channels. Also, if you have any comments, please use the chat if you want to get in contact with our speakers. So having said this, we're ready to start with this first panel, and I would ask our panel speakers if we could, I don't know if they're already connected, if we could open our cameras so that we can see you. Hi, Paloma. Welcome. I'm very glad to be here at this conference, and this is a very special moment for me to share my experience as an editor. Thanks very much. It's going to be a great honor, and this will be one of the a very interesting table. It's a very important one, just as all the one that we have today, so that we can start building this agenda that we want. Do we have our other panel members? If you could open your cameras as well. Well, if you're not ready.
No veo acá. Permítanos unos segundos.
I don't see the panel members here. Silvina Molina, thanks very much. Well, the thing is that this platform does not allow us to see all of you. So welcome, Silvina. If you want to open your microphone as well, Silvina, all the panel members, if you could please open your microphones just to know that we're all connected.
Silvina, qué gusto.
Hi, Silvina. Hi, I'm ready. How's everyone? We're glad to have you here, Silvina. Thanks very much for the invitation. As Paloma was saying, this is a great opportunity. Well, we have met in other spaces like this, and it's always a great honor to share experiences and to listen to you. So thanks very much. Congratulations to all the team of CIMAC for this great effort. Thanks very much, Silvana. It's great to see you from the distance. So yeah, well, this helps us get closer now, now that we're all in lockdown, and that I mean, it's a big challenge, but a challenge for the world to keep working on this. And well, as gender editors, I think you'll share with us how you've overcome this process and how you've been working and how you've been doing journalism in these conditions of lockdown. So then we have some colleagues missing. I don't know, Adriana, if you can help me. Are they connected already? So we have Mariana Iglesias. I don't know if Mariana Iglesias is here. Mariana Iglesias is trying to connect, and Diana is joining us in a moment. Just 2 minutes. They are about to be connected. Sure. Thanks very much for showing up on time. All right, so let's wait for a couple of minutes so that we start with our panel. Thanks very much for being here.
Buenos días.
Good morning. Good morning, Diana. Welcome. We also have Mariana Iglesias here.
Por favor, operación, ¿me ayudan ingresando a Emi Iglesias al panel? Gracias.
Solo que yo tengo el nombre de Mariana Iglesias, ¿no?
¿Ahí me ven? ¿Me escuchan?
Can you see me? Can you hear me? Great, perfect. Yeah, we can see you and hear you. Welcome, Mariana. So I think that we're all connected. Yeah, you can change your name. Yeah, just click on those three dots. Change the name. Yeah, that's where you can change your name, Diana. Yeah, you're now Diana Juarez. Great. Great. So yeah, we're all connected. All the four panel members are connected. So let's get started. Thanks very much for being. Thanks very much for accepting this invitation. So I'm gonna give you a brief presentation. I'm gonna introduce you a little bit about the biography of all our panel members today. And I'll start by Silvina María de la Luz Molina Lardit. Silvina is the first gender and diversity editor of the Argentinian National News Agency from Argentina, TELAM. She's the author of Noticias que Salvan Vidas, that's a manual for journalists on adequate journalistic coverage of gender violence. She's also the co-author of the Manual of Gender for Journalists. She's author of the Guide for the Right Treatment of violence, sexual violence against girls, boys, and teenagers, and she drafted the Guía para Informar con Perspectiva de Género, a guide for informing with gender perspective for the Constitutional Court of the Dominican Republic. She's a member of the International Network of Journalists with a Gender Perspective and was awarded the Lola Mora Prize by the legislature of the city of Buenos Aires for her career in gender journalism. And welcome, Silvina. Welcome to this panel. And we have Mariana Iglesias. Mariana has a degree in communication sciences and specializes in journalism from the University of Buenos Aires. She's currently an editor at Clarín newspaper. She writes about social issue trends, culture, education, health, and the city. And in recent years, she has specialized in issues related to women, children, discrimination, and violation of rights. Then we have Paloma Martinez Zamorana. Paloma is head of content and equality editor at Radio Nacional España. She's responsible for the portal Todas por Igual from RTVE since 2018, and she's the president of the Equality Observatory of Radio and Television from Spain since December 2020. Then we have Ana Requena. Ana is an editor-in-chief of gender at eldiario.es. She was part of the founding team of this newspaper in 2012. She has been dedicated especially to economic and social issues such as labor rights, care, labor market, feminism, conciliation, or male violence. She's co-author of several books on communication and reports on trafficking of women and acid attacks in Bangladesh, femicides in Mexico, or gender violence in Gaza. And she has received the Imparables Award of Castilla de la Mancha for her contribution to equality in the media, as well as the Pilar Blanco Award for Social Labor Communication. Then we have Diana Juarez Torres. Diana is editor of La Cadera de Eva in the Mexican media La Silla Rota. She's an expert in analysis and dissemination of content in the business and journalistic area. So thanks very much to all of you. Thanks very much for being this morning with us. And thanks because we can now build. So, well, we will encourage a conversation here. I'll be asking you for some questions. We're going to get some questions for the audience as well, so that we can think about the position or the role that gender editors play now, the learnings that we have, and the following steps. Let's think if we can build in the world a new policy or politics so that all the mass media have a gender editor, and how we move forward, if that's the right path, so that we can include the gender perspective embedded in all the information process that this has to do with social media and the media. So I'd like to start thinking about you with Silvina. So why don't you share with us, how did you trigger this need of having a gender editor? Tell us more about it. Why did you reach this conclusion at Tela? I'm going to say something that's very evident, but it's very interesting. I mean, all of us that we are at this role, we have had different experiences depending on the historical context and our media. And this is a very feminist construction. I mean, not all our experiences are the same. There are many different experiences depending on the context. And well, at Telam, we have been working on gender through informal networks. That was the first thing we did. And then in 2008, well, the neoliberal government led by Mauricio Macri fired half the staff of Telem, and the agency started with a new process of fight, of resistance for the ones that work at the Argentinian public media outlet. Well, we don't have time for explaining the full process, but well, the conclusion of this process was a positive one, both for all workers here and through the women assemblies that we had in this conflict. And after the General Assembly, we came up with new proposals for the change of government in 2019. So then we had the inclusion of a gender equality for that. So when in December 2008, that was just led by women, feminist women. So that's why I'm talking about the context. Context is important. So one of the first decisions that the chair of and all the, well, they asked me to be the gender equality. I want to clarify that I'm also the gender equality and diversity. I also asked that this was added because I think that we all know that this gender perspective opens it to lots of possibilities of working a very interesting journalism to show the diversity as a society. And when I talk about diversity, it's not just the LGBT community, but also that we have to include the different types of women, migrant women in poverty, women, homeless women, the elderly women that are more vulnerable now in the pandemic, women with disability. And while we're on that challenge, well, that's real briefly how the process started. And well, I guess that we're gonna talk about this later of how we're working on it and what we're doing, but that's how we started here at Telam. Lucia, you're in mute now. Oh, I know that happens all the time. So thanks, Lucia. Mariana Iglesias. Now, I like to ask you a question. So this is an experience that, as Silvina just mentioned, like each media or all the context that we have, of course, they're different. So it's very interesting to hear your experience at Diario El Clarín to reach this point so that we can bring this space of gender editor. So where are you coming from? I mean, and mainly when you are like a private media, like, and as we all know, well, Argentina is the country that has the highest number of gender editors in the mass media. Then throughout the continent, we did not find the same experience. And that's why we find this very interesting to work with you and to listen to your experience. So, Mariana Iglesias, tell us a bit about that. How did this process start in El Clarín? Hi, hello everyone. Thanks very much for this invitation. Well, at El Clarín, we had a very interesting process, different to the one of Silvina, because Clarín Group is a big group. It's a private entity. So we have newspapers, radio, television. So this is one of the largest groups. We have the highest ratings and audience. We have a website that's the top one. It's a very important media that sets the agenda. But the reality is that our newspaper did not have gender perspective. Maybe just the will of one of our colleagues, Sibila Camps. She was advanced to her time, but that was the only perspective that we had at that time. And then I joined El Clarín in 1995, but just after the year 2000, Clarín started talking or discussing gender subjects, but there was always an excuse. We needed a new law, and Argentina has different laws and very advanced laws when it comes to the rights of children, the rights of women, and of course gender identity, equal marriage, protection of women. So we have lots of laws, so that allowed us to include gender, but it was very little at that time. I guess that the before and after was on June the 3rd that we had a demonstration. We had a lot of women attending these demonstration, women, men, because we were demanding to stop femicide. It was Ni Una Más, and I was there at that plaza. I used to attend all these different all these different conferences. So they called me all the time. I was there, and since that moment, well, our newspaper, that's a massive newspaper as well. At that time, well, then they started reading these type of demonstrations in a different way. They started realizing that this was not just a thing about feminist women, but that it was a full society fighting for their rights. And then the newspaper started reading it like that. And from there, there was more interest on this. I was fully covering all these topics on gender. But well, the reality is that the coverage was kind of not that interesting. There were lots of stereotypes, discrimination. The coverage was not equal. And then we started seeing more things like these all over the world. We have the Me Too movement. Then we had this wave of complaints. And then in 2018, we had the fight for legal abortion. So, well, that meant that every day we had this type of news in the mass media. So then the mass media took note about these, that these are important topics to cover that are cross-cutting to all the city for not, I mean, not just to women. They are topics of interest for everyone. So, well, the topic was already covered. We still needed to have more people covering these topics and to have better coverage of these. So that's when we started with this requirement. The requirement that Clarin, well, was a personal thing. I went directly to ask for this position. I asked for the reasons of why I needed this position, and mainly because my group signed an agreement with the United Nations for eradicating gender inequality. And the group was committed to have better content, to be more careful with gender perspective content. So this was not fully happening. So with that excuse, I proposed myself for this position, and then I also read that Jessica Bennett was appointed for this, and I said I want to be like her in my media. And then we had to wait for some time in the newspaper so that I would get appointed. And I have to tell you that I also had the support of all my colleagues in the newspaper, because, well, we all, of course, want to work on quality journalism. And yeah, we were requesting for training, to get training so that we would all be trained. And well, this is what I requested, but there was a collective requirement to the managers in the group so that we would get this position and that we would also get training. So that happened at the beginning of 2019. So thanks very much.
De repente también dentro de los medios.
Thank you very much. We see also a bit of what is happening within the media. We have that need to look around and see that we have this full area that is the citizenship, claiming the rights and the space for women among the media. So Paloma, let's join you all the way in Spain. Let's go there and tell us how radio and TV for Spain, Radio y Televisión Española, have reached this point in time, and also how you have managed to achieve this. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, good morning to you. At RTVE, we are a very large public media, so we didn't have the figure of the editor per se, but we were actually trying to come through with a law that became effective in 2004 and 2007. At that time, for national TV in Spain, we had a zero tolerance program implemented, which was a way to make evident the gender violence that was achieving great levels, headed by Luz Montero, who represented the feminists at the time. This was almost 17 years ago, and after all this time, we're still kind of dragging our feet on this. We're not at the speed that we would like to reach yet. But in Spain, and especially at RTVE, I would like to say that we've always had this awareness to make the situations evident, to denounce them. And we've had a treatment of information that varies in a way from what had been done so far in other media. We had the need to create the position of the Gender Equality Director for TV and Radio. And that was from the 8th of March in 2018, where all of Spain came out to the streets and really denounced how small was the visibility of women in media and how information was biased, how we saw these steps multiplying, and how there was really no way to have any sort of visible positions for women. We weren't reaching equality. Managing boards did not have a female presence, so it was decided to create this role, which had already existed in other media, with Pilar Alvarez, for example, at El País, or at CFE, where we had Ms. Crespo. So some of the companies were already noticing that we needed to create this position and head in this way. So RTVE created the equality position, who was Alicia Gomez Montano. Unfortunately, she passed away last year. And now we have Carolina Roman in the post. For national radio in Spain, I was appointed, and also to join the comments of my colleague from El Clarín. I have to say that support has been massive. Many of the women at RTVE were already organizing. We had our WhatsApp group, we had a group on Telegram, and we were already mobilizing. Basically out of the need to change the language that was used in information. And we had this awareness that we needed the change and it needed to move along somehow. And it also came about from October 2019, where we moved up from 54,000 audio and video documents and at our TVE. Over this first quarter, we have 250 documentaries, interviews, and so forth. So it has been a massive climb. Now, it also had to have some internal training because, of course, our payroll requires, our labor force requires that all this information is shared with them. For example, if we report on a female murder or assassination, this is not just a death, this is an assassination, it's a murder. So we created a guide as well that was implemented this past December, and all our colleagues, both male and female, use it habitually. We all need to follow the same line of thought. We need to be on the same boat about this. So we used to see all this information
Y ahí tenemos muchísimas recomendaciones de
equal. And we have a lot of recommendations on there. We've had meetings with the género, talked precisely about
siempre de forma despectiva hacia la mujer, que se pueden cambiar todas las mentalidades.
All this sort of work is happening, how this affects the mindsets, and of course, as in the role of editor, we would like to suggest, as well as the participation that we make, that we have this transversal participation. Among all this, I'm very proud of what we have achieved in our children's network, which is CLAN. This is where our efforts are very significant. We also have a delegate working, because I think that change comes from a grassroots level, and education in childhood is essential for the children to really understand that 50% of society is women. We're not having debates without female participation. We are actually, in a way, refusing to go back to the way things used to be. And I'm very happy to share this and to see this, because it has been a way to discover over the pandemic that we have fantastic female scientists, that of course we also have philosophers who are helping out and who are also doing research. Some of them are even working on a vaccine. So it's about really bringing women forth and realizing that they need to come on board, that women are here to stay, and that the fight is going to continue. So thank you very much. Well, Paloma, now that you mention it, now that you mention all these debate tables, the round tables, we call them tertulias here in Mexico as well. And we just had the International Women's Day. We held a debate table where it was only men analyzing and discussing March 8th. So there were only male reporters, philosophers, artists, and so forth, but there was not a single woman on that debate table. And we still see those contrasts. It's what we still experience. And I bring it up because it gives way, it opens the door for me to introduce Diana Juarez. Diana Juarez is in charge of this space called La Cadera de Eva and La Silla Rota. So Diana, please tell us a little bit about how you reached this point in time in Mexico where this is still the reality. So you're opening up the space, La Cadera de Eva, or Eva's hips. Well, hello everybody, wherever you are in the world. Good morning for Mexico, good afternoon for the rest of the world. Now, La Cadera de Eva started with an attempt to understand the phenomenon of violence against women. We noticed that there were more and more femicides growing. We saw more demonstrations. So first we had an interest to understand why this was happening. And then it was also a type of service that we wanted to provide to women and inform them as well on how to prevent violence, how to be aware and alert, and that's how it started out. I remember to launch it at first, we had no idea how to really do, how to create this section because of the discourse happening inside this redaction, where I was taken on as a feminist, even in 2017, 18, saying a feminist was a bit of taboo, and we were already a group that was consolidated and that had a presence. So even with that, we created this association, then this area as a service space. We even created a committee where Lucia participates. And one of the remarks being made was, why did we need a gender section and not a transversal outlook? So yeah, La Cadera de Eva is part of a website called La Silla Rota, which looks at general politics and affairs in general. So first we had this segmented look, but as we moved forward, we realized that our section was bringing all other sections to this transversal outlook and figure out how to start narrating women's stories. But not just that, but it was the mindset and the outlook of gender perspectives that went over global affairs, politics, even sports. So it was an exercise in which we had a section that invited all other sections to reinforce this path that we had been tracing only for a year and a half. In a way, it's been my job as well to walk my colleagues hand in hand, especially when we have questions come up, like if their narration, their wording is proper, if it's suitable, if they have questions about how to discuss abortion, for example, how to give it a voice, and how to move forward without creating a bias, but also taking on the context. Now, there were two events that pointed out the importance and the need for this. First of all, the demonstration from 2019, which came up because of the attempt, the harassment of two policemen against 4 young women in Azcapotzalco. So we needed to bring the focus on demonstrations, even the violence that came from it, the vandalism, broken glass, and so forth. So we saw this need of how to cover the demonstration. Where are we going to put our attention? So we had a debate within our site, like, why not discuss the broken glass? We have to, but why are we breaking the glass? What's behind that? What's the motivation for breaking the glass? We also see a turning point, which was the pictures from Ingrid Escamilla, where we had this whole reflection behind. We didn't publish the photos at all. It was only mentioned, but we were already discussing how we would narrate violence against women. Now, as the process moved on for our section, we realized that it's not just about giving a negative context for this, but it's like, why is making women protest and break the glass? So we needed to look at female leaders. We need to look at all the aspects related to a gender perspective. So in Mexico, we had two presidents as well for sections with gender perspective, one of them being CIMAC. And over this path, we also had to learn from them, from our predecessors, and also we had to consider how to talk to younger women. But along the way, we realized there are no generations, there's no age gap. This discourse is for every woman. So that's it. Thank you very much, Diana. All of you have talked in a certain way, have spoken about transversal outlooks, right? You didn't stay within your niche, within on your own island or your own little space, but your presence, from what I hear, is that there's an impact on other sections. So I would like now for you to share your experience about making that jump. We might have that idea that we're sticking to our own little groups, our own little clusters of people. But now we have to look at placing gender perspective in our news items. What's the role of a gender editor? How much are you involved in creating this global perspective on, on how you impact the media and how you create the news? What is your role in this chain of information? Who would like to start? Silvina, well, we can go around. So this is individual now. I could hear that common thread among everybody. We have that transversality, as Mariana said as well. We, as a country, have 15 years of campaigning for legal abortion. We have 34 years of experience with the feminists, and also we have a history of democratic reconstruction after a military dictatorship. Yesterday was the anniversary even of the dictatorship. But we have this huge social mobility and social context within which I see our history. It's personal and professional. So that has brought me to this role, and that's how I take it on, and I try to replicate it. Now, while I'm taking on this role, when I first came on board, I had to go all over the sections, and then we had the pandemic and quarantine, and I've been managing the role online. But I'm doing well. I'm very happy about it. I'm happy that I got to where I am, even with all these obstacles. So then I started to communicate with the other sections. Now, this is a huge medium of information. We also have audiovisual, we have radio, we have a website, we have all our social media, and everything needs to have the gender perspective factor implemented. I could not have done this by myself. Even as a feminist militant, in my experience, I know that it's impossible to do things alone. So I had to invite all the sections for each of them to decide if there was anybody in there who wanted to walk along this process with me. So we created a voluntary gender team where we have representatives from all our different sections. We're reaching our first year, and I asked people if they wanted to renew the role. Many of them are. And now I really wanted to see this participation throughout the year. So with all this work, we are working on our journalistic task. We're looking at the different sections. We're thinking of new sources to bring in as well. That's huge, bringing in new sources to our coverage. So we have gender perspective, which affects all of journalism, because we know that we can call certain people who will give us a solution in 5 minutes. These are people who are used to talk with the media, and they can give us solutions very quickly, especially for us who work on an immediate timeline. The challenge, of course, is to propose new sources. And as Paloma said, with the pandemic, it just became so evident that we have so many interesting sources that have come up that are available to us for consultation. And we're looking at a joint coverage. We even have an initial section of gender perspective, but we had this instance for the agency, which had already been working on gender issues. And this is the job of our female colleagues, for example, individuals and collectives. And at this point, I I know that the agency is ready for this transversality, not just for one specific section. And we're actually managing to do this. We're achieving the goal, even in all sections, even in those that are most difficult. Of course, we still have a long road to travel. We're doing some trial and error still, but what I really like about this is that we have permanent dialogue with our working teams. They know that I'm available 24/7, but what I really wanted them to understand is that I'm not a censor. I'm a colleague. I am someone who is walking along with the process and learning from the process, that I am there for any queries or any questions. Sometimes I might put it up to them, like, how are we covering this process? Sometimes we have some leeway to cover pieces, but others, the issue is very punctual, very specific, and we need to think things over. So we're doing very interesting work. We're working for the first time, Natella, with a female photo editor. There had never been a woman on this team. Now we have one. So now we're going to have a male journalist also coming into our gender group. So we're thinking about images in a very interesting way to have inclusive photos and images. We're thinking about photojournalism and how it can be suitable when it comes to gender-related journalism, especially on topics that have to do with a sexual nature. So we're looking at different things to create this dialogue, and this is what I can share so far. Thank you, Silvina, who would like to continue. We also have some questions coming in. One of them is, what does a gender editor do exactly? You've told us in general ways, but how can you tell us about this more specific way? Tell us about your experience, what you do on a day-to-day basis. Mariana, perhaps you can continue. Right, I'll answer to that question. What does a gender editor do? First of all, I think, or at least what we try to do, is to cover what happens on a daily or weekly basis, anything of significance related to gender. That's what we cover. That's what we try to look at in the best way possible. So that kind of writes out our agenda, and it also helps all other media, or at least tries to get them to cover these topics. As Silvina said, we also look at the different voices, our sources. So we're trying to create diversification for our voices. So Silvina, I know we've had this agenda for ages, and we used to always call the same people, the same men who are always on TV or radio, but no, we need to get out of that to break out of the box and try to call in people. So at the paper, we're trying to create this agenda with female voices who are specialists now, specialists on all topics, even sports, um, show business, international affairs, everything. We know that there are women working on every field on the front line. And we're not looking at them, we're not listening to them. So we want to bring in that possibility because, of course, it's going to be different to what we've heard throughout the ages. We need this perspective that's been lacking historically. Also, with what Silvina was saying, we need to look at how we handle our images. Sometimes we mind every single word and period and comma that we use, but then we have that 7,000 character word that is ruined by a photo that goes along with that image or with the video. So we need to look at what accompanies our words. We're analyzing it, we're looking into it. And this is also a plus of gender perspective, where in whatever scenario, we don't have to take it on a case-by-case basis. We need to put it in a context. If we have a woman who has been murdered, it doesn't matter what her name is, what neighborhood shows where we need to look at all the femicides in each neighborhood, region, area, because we get out of the box of just a woman being murdered to look at systemic cultural violence, social violence that relates to
O sea, tenemos que
a
salir
patriarchal macho culture. So we need to get out of that small story to always give it a conceptual framework and look at what we're actually talking about, which is a lack of equality and discrimination, and to give it a social, cultural framework, to give it proper context. That is where we see the actual weight of what we're trying to communicate. I also think it's important. It's very difficult for the media to convey within their space is that they take time for a deeper reflection to actually analyze these matters, even with in-depth interviews or research to continue analyzing and explaining why even nowadays in this world, women are so highly discriminated and are also so unequal, or why this violence,
Bueno, que
which
sí.
is unexplainable, still exists. So yeah, I mean, it can be explained, but then what can we do to combat it? I think that the plus of gender perspective is to have this macro general outlook and actually see from the specific to more vast consideration that gives additional weight to each story and subject matter. Thank you, Mariana. So next, Paloma, I would ask you to tell us a little bit about how this works at RTV and how this has been translated into transversality. You told us about moving from 54 reports to 500. This is kind of shaking everyone into looking at the size that it can actually reach in terms of all the information, of course, in addition to what you create in a day, it must be massive. But we still see a challenge there. So Paloma, if you please. Right, just turn on your mic, but that's okay. Okay, well, in the role of gender editor is mostly about being seen. Let me explain that. So when we have this role, even from the redaction of radio and TV, we know that if it's there, it's not to censor or control, but actually to bring attention to the matter. So being present even brings our redaction to think about, oh, well, I haven't interviewed any women this month. I'm going to create this report. I'm going to work on this. So we have presence now. And even us being there is making our labor force think about what they're informing on. If it's actually covering that 50% of society, which is women, and it's just as population in general. It affects everyone. So I've noticed as well that sources are essential. For me, those spokespeople, the press usually looks for men. I've noticed that. So as an editor, you have to say, okay, I want to discuss this project, but I know that it's being directed by a woman. I don't want to hear from the male boss of communication for the laboratory. So I want to talk to the woman who's actually working on it and who will know what she's talking about. So it's not a prepared interview either. And this is working. For example, with the political parties that you know now in Spain, you're undergoing a quite complicated political situation. And it's been realized that women have great contributions. Even, for example, we have a whole new perspective on a political party coming from a woman. And they have noticed themselves that women are added value. We really enrich our contents. So it doesn't mean that men don't, but it means that it's harder for women to actually express what we're doing. This is such a paradox that even we have a show called Radio Has Eyes, where we talk about artists, painters, architects, sculptors, all women, always with a female perspective. And I've noticed that from there, women are actually claiming that they get paid the same as men, that museums show the equal amount of female work. And I think this is revolution. It's not about control or censorship. It's about suggesting. It's about expanding the perspective. And that's what we're working on, and we're actually achieving our goals. Thank you, Paloma. Diana, what would you have to say about this? Well, I wanted to share with everyone that one of the attributes that we have at La Silla Rota is that many of the people on our team are women or young people, and this has really brought a gender perspective to our whole team. So when we were first building the section, most of the questions that came up, or the matters were saying, we can't be feminist activists and journalists. So that's a matter that still needs a resolution. But you cannot be a feminist and not be an activist. You need to have several sources to begin with to narrate a story. But I think I'm still working on the answer for that, how to cover all three roles. And one of the questions that came up was from the manager of our website, of our news portal. And as everyone said, just our presence, just us being there, me being there, and other women at Cadera de Eva, or even at Metrópoli, the female editors, that has led to coverage that has gender perspective. I think our presence and the training for each of our colleagues, both male and female, has changed. So people approach us women and ask us what we think of a certain story. And I think that it's created over time. Now, something that we do is we look at our subjects. For example, femicide. Do we focus on states? Do we focus on section? Or now we had March 8th, where we had lots of reports from male teachers making misogynist comments. So then what do we report on? So the decision that we've taken is to analyze. So we give ourselves the time and the permission to actually go in depth on a subject. We saw several femicides, for example, where the argument from the authorities was that they were suicides. So why are the authorities claiming that these are suicides? So we had to take 2 or 3 specific cases, go into interviews, go into research, even interview some observation institutions. So we led to the state's perspective, but then analyzing the patterns actually led us to analyzing a certain story. One of our reflections also had to do with going beyond a click. We can't afford to just be clickbait. And that is something that we have become very aware of.
Thanks very much, Diana, for bringing this, because people are searching for likes to their sites. Okay, so 2 more topics that you brought to this table. Silvina said that how can I let it clear to everyone that I'm not censoring anyone? Paloma was also saying that, okay, we know we're not going to censor. I mean, so yeah, I mean, this is still here. And the question is the following. I mean, we still have this false idea that having a gender editor is someone that will censor, that tells of people. So which are the burdens? I mean, you've spoken about the nicest part of it. That's fantastic, but it's not everything like great. And we are facing, and the ones that have been here for a long time, we have faced different types of questioning, of people pointing out these things. So I would like to ask you to talk about the burdens that we faced and how you've overcome these burdens. Because, well, to me, it's clear that you are where you are now because you've been able to jump to overcome that burden and to walk the same path. So let's start the other way around. Silvina, no, Mariana, tell us. Well, I'm positive that you faced burdens and it's not an easy thing to do, and it's never easy because we are questioning journalism. We're questioning traditional journalism, what we used to do, that we had men and women, like it was like a Bible. It was written in stone, and that nobody would question. So all the things you've discussed here is, yes, how you are forcing others to rethink and everyone to rethink. So Mariana, what have you faced and how have you overcome it? Well, unlike to what Diana was just saying, in the place that I work at, where mostly all decision makers are males, older males. So, well, the pyramid of workers at my workplace, it's basically the base, it's half and half women, half men. Well, there are a lot of young writers now, but as we go up in the pyramid, that are the decision making positions, women start fading away and we just have men left. So there we have the first obstacle that we have to overcome. That's the decision making process, the place of important decisions. And well, that's one of the burdens that we have. The other burden that we have has to do with these that we're saying that, well, in Argentina now things are changing, and also in universities and all these places where people go to study journalism. Now we are already including gender perspective journalism. We cover these topics. Education is different. Yeah, when I went to college, this did not exist, and many colleagues of my age or my classmate, older and younger classmate, do not have a gender perspective education. So training is very important for this. And well, in 2019, we had training on these. In 2020, this kind of training stopped. We also had this ritual of coming here to our office. And well, what Silvina was saying, that she has virtual meetings or on the internet, but it's not the same thing. I mean, my experience is that it's not the same thing, like drinking mate, the whole in the office with your colleague to discuss and talk about these, then so that they can change a little bit their perspective. That it's not the same thing than just texting each other. That hasn't been that easy to me. And what I've also seen is that there are some colleagues that are still, well, what we would say is that they are sometimes wrong in how they publish news or how they write about those news. And it's not that they don't have the right intention. It's just that sometimes we use words that are very natural, that we've normalized, that we've used them for a long time, and that maybe for us, we have other type of knowledge, and our perspective there would be, okay, so this is not correct, this is not right. But there is a huge lack of knowledge that has to do with the normalization, historical normalization of some topics and subjects. And what I see is a bit of a reluctancy, like in spite of having knowledge and in spite of knowing that it's not the right thing to do or say, or that maybe publishing some note does not have any type of gender perspective that's discriminatory or sexist, they still do it, they anyway do it. So that is the little bit of reluctancy that I still see, and we see it all the time. And yeah, and I think that every single day we fight against that at some point what we try to do is to work more, we get more work, or we ask some for some notes to some of colleagues that we know that we will solve things fast and easily. So we're also giving more work to some people that have this gender perspective, and that, yeah, we also need this. We need more training. Well, I'm very glad that now universities have this gender perspective component, and we have to still fight against this reluctancy that, well, we have it all over society, and well, the media is also part of that society that's also being a bit reluctant or very reluctant. Totally agree, this reluctance is there, and they sometimes take advantage of it, and they do it right. Okay, so Diana, you were speaking about silla rota, many workers, many colleagues that are very young, so who's taking decisions, and that's where you play a role. Exactly, that's one of the things and obstacles for in the decision-making process. Directors are just men. We don't have women. The highest position that we have is editors. So yeah, there's still some bias there, and well, the media is still being reluctant. Well, and at first, I was saying that a gender perspective would include like everyday situations or trendy situations. Even myself, I do that. I mean, and then as we move forward in building the construction, well, gender perspective is cross-cutting. I mean, and what I want to share with you is when we started covering the candidate case of Felix Salgado. Uh, he's a candidate that's accused of rape. So we started covering the topic for the very first time, and then we started to give follow up to it. And as it started to become more polemic, one of the comments was, "Stop that topic because that's politics, and we're not gonna bring it to the nation." And it's like, how? How come? I mean, so politics is not about us or women. So it's been learning from everyone, from the director, from us, like, we have to be there, we have to be present, and we have to be noticed and seen, and also to have to bring stories, to do research. So we've been persistent, and our work has taken us to a position where it's not just news. I mean, it's not just news that covering a topic of women is just talking about our everyday life, about fashion, artists. And actually, our section also has an influence on the section of shows and show business. And well, it has a gender perspective, but we always had those decisions, or not just talking about life, the regular life, but also to have this vision of how it has an impact even in the show business section. And well, I also wanted to add that education, this thing that education, that Mariana was saying, it's important that schools start having this view. And they've invited me, and well, I'm still at my doctorate degree, and even for at this level, that research or with a gender perspective is not for the communications area, but it has to do with the gender division. And that's a question that I have now, that's catching my attention now, like, how come those questions are present in all institutions? Thanks very much, Diana. And now Paloma and Silvina have spoken about sources, the importance of sources, and the obstacles that they face. So they're asking here for Silvina. They are asking you the gender source for Argentina. Is it from the citizenship, or is it your proposal? I guess that it's these voices that we're trying to find so that we can cover these more deeply, or the everyday. So this is a question that they're asking here at the chat. If you could answer this question, Silvina, in this participation, and if you could talk about these problems or difficulties. I don't understand that, if it comes from the citizenship. Yeah, Yeah, of course it comes, we're looking for sources, and we're working on some project now so that we can make this job easier of finding diverse sources. But of course, yeah, but it's always good to add more sources, to include more sources. And yes, I'm this thing about reluctancies. I'm also convinced that there are reluctancies all over in the media, such as this huge media that's the public news media. I mean, you also have a panel of what we are as society. So there are reluctancy, and one of the important topics that we're covering, and we have to decide for a guide or a protocol where it's very clear what are the sources for covering, and that we have to be respectful. We have to be respectful and mindful of human rights. We have to have gender perspective. So that's where we have to go. That would be the best case scenario. Okay, so you work in this public mass media, so these are the guidelines. Because I think that we don't have to keep talking about rights, because that's a trick. We are in a context in all our countries in Latin America. We have a reluctancy of rights. They're very visible in pandemics, that we are against everything, including rights, anti-rights, anti-everything. So we also have to be ready for those situations. We have to be very strong. We know that we have them. We have to have a very clear position now. We have to see which are the guidelines that you follow in this media. If you don't follow these, we would need to have one more option. Maybe you can go somewhere else to talk about your thoughts or about anti-rights or whatever. And then this is a personal view. I'm gonna be already 10 years here working at Telem. I'm building a relationship with most of the staff here at the agency. I started as a writer, and then I'm in this position. So yeah, we talk all the time. And when there's a reluctancy, and I don't tell them like it's because of this and that's it. I don't tell them that. I never tell them that. We talk about this because, well, it's a good opportunity so that we can share this with their section of why we're saying that this is not the right thing to say, or that this source cannot be in this note alone or directly. And a boss of mine told me, okay, so your thing is body to body, right? And yeah, it's because with some terms, for example, I write something and then I say like, I read everything. I read all the news all the time, and I tell them, hey, look, this term is not a term that we use. You remember that we had this training and that we've already discussed this in our group of editors, and they tell me, oh yeah, I forgot about it. I'm sorry. And my boss told me, so it's body to body, right? And I'm surprised at that because I have to insist on things that should already be clear. So I have two options: whether I can get upset, of course sometimes I get upset, or I breathe in and then again I go and repeat it. So it's like the gospel. I feel like a preacher, like I'm preaching, like like I'm a preacher of feminist journalism. So that is the way to me. And then it's also important to see how the teams, work teams are created. We have to see inside the media how we have these groups, like in this context that I told you, after this crisis in 2018 that we had in Telem. Now we have most women, most of them are feminist. So they started pointing out women, but not just women committed with the gender equality agenda in some sections. So they were appointed bosses. So that internal structure of the media has a big influence because of what Mariana was saying. Who's taking the decisions here if that's not the case? So we have to be here. We have to be in decision-making positions. and that the people that are taking this decision are committed with the gender agenda. And an additional partnership that's very interesting as well is that all public, private, media, community radio, they know that we are with very active audiences. So everything, audiences react right away, and mainly through social media. So what I always say, and I'm glad, it's like almost never remember that's a gender editor in Telam unless we make something wrong, and then they speak about it in the social media. If things are quiet, we're doing things right. So just as this click is important, it's important what we're saying, what the audience is saying, and that's where we can have very interesting partnerships so that we can work on that. And the last thing is there are people that are reluctant, that also work in the media, and you know that you cannot speak with some people. I mean, there's no way of speaking with some people. So then we look for different kinds of partnerships. That is also a reality. Yeah, so what you're saying is body to body, like on your everyday, like in real life. Right. I agree with what Silvina is saying. I've been for a long time in this position. I've worked with big teams here, the radio and television in Spain, and I'm covering these topics, and I have to know, and I know the people that I have to face, and that's very good to do. That's a positive thing to do because it's not that you're censoring them or you're not telling them that their job is not right, but that they can improve their job and to have a gender perspective on that. That's the right one, and the one that we're doing in this company. So yeah, it is true. We have an agreement with the BBC. It's a project called 50-50, 50-50. And yeah, the British, we're not the Spanish, and the other way around. So we've tried to apply it, but having 50-50 teams is very difficult. I mean, to have the same number of men and women working in a TV show, it's usually difficult. I mean, for example, sports. When it comes to sports, it's very difficult. Yeah, like things are changing, of course, but it's been hard for me because they're being more reluctant. But I have to say that I've been insisting so much. I mean, my the way that I insist is higher than their reluctancy. So there was a lot of coverage that was not open to women, and as I've seen that they've seen that it was easier. Now they are moving all these, and I'm really very happy because we have sports sections in many TV programs, and yeah, we're breaking it. Like they learn the name of the female referee or the champion of the gold medal, and they did not know this name. So this is what I was telling you. I was telling them, how come you cannot forget the name of a football player and you can't remember the name of the gold winner of the Brazilian sports woman? So yeah, we have to bring them to this position where they realize that they just have to improve. And yeah, it's an obstacle for sure, but we can rescue that. And if we have a good left hand, as we say here, you usually get them. It is true that we also have the support of the hierarchy because we have men and women in all this hierarchy of. But in my case, for instance, I have a lot of freedom because they know that there's a conflict. We're gonna solve the conflict in a civilized way. So I'm a kind of mediator that, and if we have to take the decision at higher levels, then I rise it up, and then I just withdraw and I just provide information that I think it's necessary. But I do think, well, we have to start by analyzing this. Like once that you are in front of a computer, we have to think that the world is not just led by men, but that women, we are also there, and that we have to be in all information because we're the protagonist, and they cannot leave us on the side. And I think that we're gonna get this. I'm hopeful. I'm sure that we're gonna achieve that. I think that the Favas agree with these. That yeah, we are convinced that this has changed and that this will continue to change. However, the reluctances are still there. And I was saying some minutes earlier, like in some situations, these reluctances are very ingrained. If we check at the world information, that will be our second table, and they're going to share with us what they've discovered. But yeah, Beijing 1995, the first exercise for global monitoring of media that speaks for the very time about this, that brings us in the world, well, the reality of the discrimination that women faced in the mass media. So 1995, we were just 7% of all the information produced in the mass media. And until 2015, more or less, we were just 24% of all the information. So I think that this speaks about the size, the global resistance. It's not just our media. I mean, it's a global situation. So, well, when we assess this action platform that's also based on chapter J, that's mass media, based on your experience and based on what you've done in these years, let's think about these recommendations that you can give us to jump to, so that we transform everything, so that it's not just one or two media, so that we can fully build a media ecosystem that's respectful of human rights of women, that portrays this diversity of the society. We are very diverse as a society, and that it also contributes to equality between men and women in a world that, well, now in the pandemic, we will be here for a long time, and that it has brought to the center all the big social and political and economic challenges that we have in our countries and throughout the world as well. That it has also brought to the journalists also the work that's being done. This is not a thing that's happening just in Latin America. In Europe, we're also having an impoverishment of the journalistic work. So what would be the following steps that we have to take so that we take this leap and that we can create this ecosystem that we require for the new reality? I would like to start by Diana, and Silvina will close with you if you allow us to do so. So where do we see ourselves, Diana? Which would be these steps that we have to take? Thanks very much, Lucia. Well, I just want to share my thoughts. Like, I think that everything responds to an economic system and to the context as well. So from there, well, I believe that the context has taken us to rethink and to have a gender perspective vision, because readers, users are questioning all these when it has a misogynistic point of view. So one of the steps would be to listen and to look at our readers. And well, I believe that when we talk about the responsibility of media and the audiences, well, it's a path that we work together. So we, from the media, we have to turn to see these. And well, the media is also a part of an economic system. Also, we have to start talking about these topics. And we have to look at our audience, at the people that want to read us. And well, I also wanted to share that in La Cadera de Eva is one of the sections that's better read in the Silla Rota. So if we can bring business people from there, well, we can get clicks. I'm sorry that I'm saying that, but we're in a system like that. So yeah, our section has clicks. And well, these clicks are deep, and we also include this vision, this feminist vision that helps us and to find our creativity. So it's not just bringing the note, but how am I bringing it to all platforms, Facebook, Twitter, podcast? How am I going to tell this story? So yeah, this is a challenge as well. And as they're saying, well, we have to leave our comfort zone, so we have to start telling this. If we have an audience there that's this infotainment, so how are we going to inform them with a critical vision? So yeah, we have to rethink. Also, also the context is taking us to there to create work environments that are more empathetic and respectful. Before, women could not be at a position because they cannot leave late from the office because they're mothers and this kind of thing. So we have to get rid of all those things and to start creating new ways of work that are respectful to life and the rights of people, and that they also look at all the different tasks. And I think that as a society, if men and women start getting involved in these tasks, that's like, well, that's something that happens to women as well. So I think that we're going to move forward. So thanks very much, Diana. And I would invite you to think in three levels. So what is the responsibility of the states to promote in the mass media this vision? What is the task of the media as companies or spaces for government spaces or state spaces? In Mexico, we also have this media, this public media, that I believe that they have an important commitment. We have individually as journalists, we have to look at this. So Paloma, I would pass the floor to you, then it would be to Mariana, and then we close with you, Silvina.
Yo estoy de acuerdo con lo que ha dicho Diana de los sistemas económicos, el sistema económico.
Well, I agree.
Yo sí que propondría un cambio, por ejemplo, en lo que es la publicidad. Ahí teníamos que las empresas decidir a qué
I do think that we see a major change, especially in terms of gender. I think we also have to discuss advertising. There are things that they can change. And then when it comes to regulations from government, I see that that is also fair in certain ways, but they can be a bit restrictive, specifically for commercial media. What we see in Spain is that some of the media outlets are allowed to make certain types of comments and convey certain types of information that the national networks would never be allowed to. They might be fined occasionally, but they can just fade off, and they still have a very biased view of women, and that they just have content that looks for controversy. Controversy never creates awareness. The thing is that the audience might be looking for controversy, but that never reaches the population's sense of awareness or their conscience. Then also, we signed an agreement to also have an influence by media on the image and perception of women. For this, we're looking for programmers, female programmers, to create an algorithm based on gender perspective. For example, if you start working on algorithms across all social media, that gives you a certain gender perspective, and it would give vision to a lot of women who are in the media, but that are finding it hard to be well positioned. So there are a lot of universities also that have realized that we need this programming across the technological world, and the programming is made by men, but we want women to become programmers now. So we're trying to do that now at RTV. We need women to change this type of baseline. I think that from Beijing now, we see very small steps taken. When we're making 10% more, 15% more, for us, it's finally a way to proper positioning. So at RTV, we're all, I think we're around 35 or 40% of our information that is female-based, but it also has to do with the type of information. So we need to consider the type of subject matter. When it comes, for example, to health, we see a lot more female presence. The way to change this is also to divide responsibility and also hold the decision makers accountable. I think we ourselves are responsible in that sense, and I hope that we can see that change come about sooner than we expect. At the European Union, we've given ourselves an additional 5 years for this change to come about, but we have signed agreements and standards that only suggest or recommend. I think now we need to change that verb and bring it to action and orders rather than suggestions. I think that achieves better results. Thank you very much, Paloma. So, Mariana, let's hear from you. But first, I want to discuss something that happens in Argentina with female journalists who are feminists as well. We have a very large network. We share a lot of chat groups all across the country. And it's very horizontal as well as transversal. So I think in this sense, we understand that we're not in competition. It's not about premises. Our journalistic work is not about that. It's about reaching all audiences and all age groups all around the country, all fields. And I think that the more media we have a presence in, the larger audience we will be able to reach and bring our message across. It's that way, or even including the perspective that we require and the way we need to express it to make it clear to all audiences. I perhaps would ask for something even stronger, which is putting an end to the hypocrisy in some media, in some spaces. Because, look, we're talking about really delicate issues and women in these roles. So what happens in our own workplaces? Let's look at that. I'm asking for consistency with that. We've discussed it. In Argentina, at least we have. I don't know how it's been treated in all other countries. But for example, here, men only get 2-day paternity leave. They have a child, they have 2 days to spend with that. That's even a shorter time allocation than if you're moving. So we are also asking for men to have proper paternity leave, much longer than 2 days for sure. So that brings consistency between what we're writing, what we're asking for, and what we experience as women who work and our mothers and experience in our own companies. So I bring about the term hypocrisy as well, because we have gender perspective female editors, we have training, but we still know that private media need their likes, they need their ratings, they need the audience, and they're still creating all of this controversy at the expense of violence against women, against girls, against children. So we need to have very serious commitment from all media that just says, okay, we're not going to take likes into account or our ratings on this particular subject. We need the public commitment as well to kind of not give that to certain subjects. For example, we had the story of a young girl who was kidnapped for a few days, and over the media, over a lot of outlets, they give a lot of details about the girl's family life and their families' lifestyle, and there had to be 4 organizations for the protection of children to get together and issue a press release, a community, to tell the media, stop giving details. You're affecting their safety. You're affecting the whole family's security. And I think at this point in time, news outlets need to realize that you cannot keep doing this. Not listened to, they're telling us to keep quiet because we need to give the news in a certain way. And that might bring us likes or higher ratings or whatever. So we really need to have clear understanding with the media on certain topics. So thank you, Mariana. Silvina, if you please. Right. Obviously, I agree with what the colleagues have said. I will try to repeat it. And just what else do you want us to do? I think that we've talked for over an hour about all the changes we brought about all in different parts of the world collectively, in our newsrooms, in the streets. So now, as Mariana said, we have different contexts. We have the pandemic. We know that we're responsible for the care of, for example, people with disabilities, older groups, etc. So what are we asking for? All right, we want the media from our society. We want them to be careful. We want them to take care. Of course, we also want equality. We have a lot of media outlets that provide services such as, I don't know, daycare centers. They provide different type of care. All right, we get that. But now, the media have to take on real commitments. What they're doing right now is just politically correct. But what we need is to find a way to actually monitor that they're fulfilling their commitments. So that's why I asked, what else can we do? If we are the decision makers in the media, we need to be accountable, we need to be responsible, and we need to monitor. But there's also a certain responsibility from the public. For example, a lot of the public companies, they get fined, they pay the fine, they don't care. But for national media, it's different. So we need to think about a certain strategy. And the media outlets, as well as the state, would have to think about a way to finish with this inequality, which is the basis of violence and femicide. So we need to finish with that inequality. And then, of course, states at a region or community level have to find a way to accompany us who have been working on this type of journalism for years, and they need to find a way to monitor the media without falling in the trap that we're affecting the freedom of speech. Because if we prove that we are defenders of the freedom of speech, because that's us. If someone is a defender of freedom of speech, it's us. So both state and companies need to accompany us in terms of what we're doing for feminist journalism and gender perspective. So what we see right now is not completely working. Of course, we need accountability, and if something is not working, we need to acknowledge that. So we need everyone to start thinking of how to make things actually work. And we're here to answer questions. There are a lot of professional women who are extremely well qualified and trained who are available for assessment. So how are we working towards chapter J? I feel like in a way we're going around in circles. We're like a hamster in its wheel. We stop for a minute, we complain, we wonder, and then we continue rolling in our hamster wheel. So I think that the challenge is to work on this, all the while enjoying what we've achieved as well. But now we need to pressure news companies, either public or private, and we need to pressure the state. They need to sit down and think about how to work on this, how to work on public and private policies when it involves the media. And they really need to be given a seat at the table with proper commitments. Well, thank you so very much for your participation. I'm really grateful. I think that we need to still reflect on the topic to find solutions and get off the hamster wheel. Also open the door to the cage and then explore new lands. Thank you all so very much. Um, it's been a pleasure. And for those of you joining us, don't leave. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we will begin our following panel. Thank you all very much. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Muy buenas tardes. El equipo técnico les vuelve a dar la más cordial bienvenida al
Good
foro.
afternoon. The technical team would like to welcome you again to this forum, pending on urgent actions for the future on the 25th anniversary of Chapter Day from the Beijing platform. During these forums, we have interpretation available in English and Spanish. Go to the interpretation option at the bottom of your Zoom screen with the world icon and select the language that you prefer.